Good morning. There we go. All right. This is a big room. Do you guys back here, do you even know there's people that exist over here? It just keeps going. It's like a big golf course dogleg here. So welcome. My name is Brian Day. I'm a member of what we call, this week at least, the Exchange Customer Advisory Team. I'm on the same team as some of the other folks you've already seen speak this week, Ross Smith, Jeff Mealiff, Greg Taylor, and a whole bunch of others that are happy to be here this week and share with you a bunch of new exciting information. Hopefully you guys are going to bring the same energy we saw a couple years ago at MEC. I already see faces in here. I remember the end of my MEC was basically 4 a.m. in the morning in Austin at some bar on a street that was in an old house, talking about exchange designs around a fireplace. So hopefully you guys brought that back with you this year. We'll be here all week, hopefully to get you everything you want. So we're going to spend the next 73 minutes and 52 seconds talking about Exchange 2016, things you need to think about as you're about to introduce it into your environment, some of the tricks along the way to hopefully set you guys up for a pleasurable experience. So before we get to that, if you haven't already seen this slide, we wanted to make a shout out. Rob Wally's up here in the front in the orange Ignite shirt, very front row in the peanut gallery. If you are interested in becoming what we call a TAP member, Technical Adoption Program for Exchange 2016 or SharePoint 2016, either come see Rob afterwards or head down to the expo. We've got Dave Espinoza, Kern Harbin, a bunch of other folks in the TAP team down there and our beta engineers to help sign you up and get you into what we call the nomination process. So you can actually play with these bits, not just in labs, but also in your production environments before they go live with the full support of Microsoft behind you. So if that interests you, please do step down there and talk to those gentlemen. This is still pre-production code, right? You've probably already been warned that there could be some things that change during the between now and the time that we release. So keep that in mind as we go along, that some of the things you see here might be tweaked. This is not final code. It is still very much a work in progress. We'll touch upon coexistence and migration processes, what they used to look like, what they look like now, and hopefully why you think that's a lot better. We'll talk about what it takes to prepare your environment for Exchange 2016. We have quite an in-depth section on namespace and certificate planning, since that seems to be an area that is always a little challenging in every unique environment out there. A couple of quick tips on actually installing 2016, and if we get to the end, we have some time, we're going to do an interesting demonstration, which is both very exciting and extremely boring. That's the goal, is to both excite you and bore you at the same time, and those of you that have been around Exchange for a long time will understand the exciting part behind it. So let's quickly talk about the migration process then and now. In previous releases, going back for quite a number of versions of Exchange right now, these are some of the things that we hear when we talk to our customers out in the field. Why is this so hard? Why do I keep going and seeing 75-minute presentations on you guys talking to us, and I leave the room still wondering how to deploy this thing? Why do I have to go and buy 1,000 servers just to get my IT team on the next version to play with it? A lot of feedback from the field has now been wrapped into the product that starting in 2013, we laid the foundation with some of the things that you probably heard Ross talk about with the not only the preferred architecture, but also the every server is an island theory, so that servers can talk to different versions, understand how to interact with each other. You're going to see some of the fruits of those labors here. So let's just jump right in. All right? So I tend to talk fast. So at the end of this, I'll also mention now before I bore people and they start leaving, I'll be down on the expo floor for about an hour or so, from 12 to 1 p.m., down in the Geek Out section to do some whiteboarding, answer any questions that you have coming up. So before we start talking on the actual process, who in the room today has already deployed 2013 in their customer environments or their own environments? Ooh, I like it. A lot of hands went up. Okay. Now, we'll keep playing the game. Who's primarily still running 2010 in their environments? Okay, kind of expected. 2007? I see a couple of nervous hands going up. That's okay. It's a good product. I'd already cut my teeth on Exchange. Who's brave enough to say 2013? And Brent's going to come seek you out. Ooh, we got a couple hands. Oh, is it 13? 2003, sorry. Titanium. Nice, the brave people in the room. All right, I'm not even going to bother going further than that. I'll buy you a drink if you're any further back. All right, so coexistence with 2010 and 2016. If you've been through the process of a 2010 and 2013 coexistence, this is going to feel identical on purpose. This is going to be the same exact experience. So we're just going to run down the condensed steps of kind of each scenario here. So your first order of business is going to be preparing the environment. We'll talk about what that means. This is where you're going to ensure that you've got the proper server versions installed, you've got the proper Active Directory, domain, and forest functional levels in place, you've done the schema extension, which everybody loves to do, everything that you've kind of expect in an Exchange upgrade over the last number of releases. This hasn't changed, same exact process. Eventually, you're going to get to installing 2016. We'll talk about what that means when you install that first box, a couple of things to be wary of, things that you can do to avoid certain scenarios so that you impact users as little as possible. You'll then be configuring your 2016 server with the same URLs as if you were configuring a 2013 server. And in fact, on the next couple of slides, you'll see that in a 2013-16 coexistence, they actually have the same URLs in place. You'll bring over certificates, because usually users don't like pop-ups saying the certificate is bad. So if you're on 2010 and if you find out as part of your migration process, when we look at namespace in a few slides, there's a probability that you actually won't be going to get a new certificate because you might be using the same exact names. Maybe if you're going to drop a couple names and you're getting near your expiration time for the certificate anyways, you'll get a new one. But there's going to be a large number of cases where you actually don't need a new cert at all until we talk about one feature. So there is a big caveat there. You'll swing your load balance namespace over to 2016. 2016 can proxy all of the traffic for 2010. There is no more legacy namespace, right? So when we're talking about 2013 and 2007, a couple of years ago, you had that legacy URL for EWS and OWA. That's gone. So we're actually talking a single namespace now entirely for 2010 and 2016. Less of that forced redirection happening because of the server versions. You'll then set up your DAGs. It's as easy as that, one bullet point, right? Just go out and click the button, set up my DAG. Right? There's an excellent session this week. I forget the time. I apologize, but on HA and storage. And actually, I just saw Boris somewhere over here. Boris, you've got a session on Friday afternoon on design concepts that come out of MCS. So if you want to get some excellent information on actually what it looks like to go through a design process and some of the things that we think about, come see Boris' session on Friday afternoon. Saved the best for last, didn't we, Boris? That's right. All right, your mailbox moves. So just like we had in 2007 to 2010, just like we had in 2010 to 2013, your mailbox moves are going to be an online process. We continue the experience of not interrupting your users during the workday as you move their mailbox. Move it behind the scenes, their Outlook profile updates. They might have to do one quick Outlook restart depending on how the move takes place, and then they're off to the races using the new version. And then essentially, it's the same guidance as before. You repeat for all of your internet-facing sites. You then come back later and do all of your non-internet-facing sites at the end. At some point during that process, we don't talk a lot about transport in the next 66 minutes and 40 seconds, but you will at some point make a decision when, for you, it makes sense to switch your transport over so that you're delivering inbound mail directly to 2016 instead of to 2010 or 2013 first. It's kind of something that we leave up to you. Some customers prefer to do it right off the bat and get any kinks out of the way. Some do it once their user base is over 50% moved because they feel that's the most efficient. They'd be right. And some like to do it at the very end as like a final step after they've moved all their mailboxes off. So that's completely up to you. So when you're in this coexistence, this is what it would essentially look like. Right? We've got our layer 4 or layer 7 load balancer here in the middle. I believe we're going to be suggesting layer 7 with no persistence so that you get the ease of a smaller number of certificate names as well as the ability to do some sort of inspection in the middle on the different protocols. Again, work in progress. There's some debates going on what the final answer is going to be. But your 2016 server, once you have flipped the namespace over, will take that traffic in. You'll hit IIS. Very much like 2013, you're going to see that there's 2 websites in each 2016 server. Default website and a backend website. So they'll come in, they'll hit that default website, they'll get authenticated, their mailbox is then located, and then depending on how your environment is set up, so if the user is in the left-hand Exchange 2010 mailbox server here, we will then proxy the traffic off to 2010 CAS, and then log them in once 2010 CAS connects to store in the 2010 mailbox. Now, if they are in a different Active Directory site, this is where it depends. I've got both arrows up there. If that remote site is internet-facing and you have configured an external URL, we will redirect that user over to the more correct external URL. If you have not configured an external URL, we will then proxy the user just like we did for the Insights server over to the non-internet facing site. This is one of those slides where we literally could do a search and replace of 13 and 16. Very similar process. You should feel very comfortable with it. And we're going to show you when you start to mix 13 and 16 in an environment that also has 10, why this is actually a really good thing. I'll let him take his picture before I flip the slide. Hurry, go. Good. All right. All right, the old way. So this is what used to happen, right? This is just high level, and we'll dig down in, but they gave us some new imagery that we could use in our slides, so I apologize if you see us using some more interesting characters throughout these presentations. So you'd start off, you'd have a load balancer that was at a diagonal to your Exchange 2013 CAS that was at a diagonal to your 2010 CAS. Your traffic would come in, hit 2013, and then we proxy the traffic back to 2010. So what you would probably expect is something like this to happen. We would tell you to buy a huge shipment of 2016 servers, drop those off, rack them, stack them, configure them, switch your namespace over, and then that would take care of all the traffic behind the scenes. Right? That is generally what has happened for the last few versions of Exchange. It can be challenging because you might only want to move a small group of users over to test things out, but you don't want to have to do it in such a way that requires a massive infrastructure reconfiguration to kind of put those people to the side while leaving the rest of production alone, just to get the IT department and a few other people on board in the new version. So we said, well, there's got to be a better way here. So let's talk about what that's going to be. So again, now we're going to talk about 13 and 16. Everything stays the same until we get down to what you see at the very bottom, the orange step. Right? And I've got a bunch of slides in here that you can look back as reference, so if I'm skipping bullets, that's why. They're primarily in here for you to have later. Well, here's an option. You can actually start moving things to 16 before you've swapped the namespace. Notice that's last. The namespace is the very last thing in the steps. You can actually proxy traffic to 2016 through Exchange 2013. So we're calling it an up version proxy. Right? We've always had the ability to do a down level proxy before, but now you can actually have your traffic come in, hit 13, and get to 16. You just install a server and configure it. It can be sitting there along all your other machines. You can move your early adopters over without affecting the rest of your environment. Of course, there'll be a couple of other things that you configure so that all the 16 functionality works, but you don't have to go and redo everything on 13 or move 13 out of the way and move the load balancer over. It's going to be a much more simplified experience for you guys and hopefully allow you to accelerate your adoption rate of 2016. So this is what we're saying is the preferred version. Let 13 do the proxying of 16. There is, of course, the other option if you want to go with kind of the more legacy approach. You can stand up as much 2016 as you want, get it all configured, and switch the namespace over to 2016 in advance. If you want to, you can do that. That will still absolutely work. We can still down version proxy from 16 to 13. You can do that every day of the week, and it'll still be fine. So you do have the options there. It's up to you. Going back one slide, we think option one is the way to go. Use the new functionality, use the capabilities that we built into the product so that each protocol knows how to talk to the up and down level versions. So the new way is, you call up your favorite vendor, you say, you know what, I need some more servers here, we're going to put 16 in the environment. So they come by, they're going to drop off hopefully a smaller amount of servers. They'll come out. Now you've essentially dropped those servers into the environment, and they're just sitting behind 2013 CAS. That's it. Now your 2013 CAS is proxying back to those systems, and all your users are still happy on 13 and 10, and you've got your IT department or whomever, your early adopters, on 16. Your next step will eventually be adding 2016 into the load balancer pool. We've got another slide coming up that goes into more detail, but you can actually mix the versions in the load balancer pool as well. So now you've got some traffic going to 13, some traffic going to 16, and behind the scenes, we figure out what's going on to send the traffic to the appropriate place. At some point in time, you've introduced enough 16 server that you can actually make your 13 servers bounce to the curb. And if you are a customer that deployed standalone roles, 2013 CAS, standalone 2013 mailbox, you could actually remove the 2013 CAS from the environment. That's the first time that I know of that we've actually had the capability to have an AD site without CAS for that version in the AD site and still have things work, because you can come through 16. 16 does not do a proxy to 13 CAS first. It goes right to 13 mailbox. If you followed our suggestion and you did the multi-role 2013 deployments, all this really means is that your 13 servers will still be there, but you've swung the traffic off of the load balancer from 13 to 16. So the default website and your 13 servers would not be receiving any more traffic from clients. They might still be getting some from active monitoring inside Exchange, but you won't have any active client traffic hitting those servers. All right? So does that sound better? Is that better than we had before for you guys? All right, nice, and claps. Excellent. So let's just dig a little deeper here. Same thing. I apologize if the lines are a little hard to see. Color palette apparently didn't work for a good large room like this. But you'd be starting off, and I'm just showing the logical layer here, right? This doesn't mean I'm saying deploy single role servers, absolutely not. This is just showing the CAS layer and the mailbox layer within the product itself. So you've got your load balancer up top, you've got your 13 client access server role, you've got your 2013 mailbox server role. You're all stand up, ready to good. I obviously can't label things correctly, so number one says 2010 CAS instead of 2013 like it should. You introduce 2016 to the environment. You now have 2013 CAS proxying directly to 2016 mailbox. As Ross mentioned, there's only one role in 2016, right? Well, actually, it's kind of two, right? Edge transport role or mailbox role. There's no more client access server role. So you've got your traffic going there. Next step, you then add that 2016 server, once you're happy with its configuration, to the load balancer. So now you've got an additional server taking load balancer traffic. These fun little orange lines are the 2013 CAS sending traffic to 2016 mailbox for users that have a mailbox on 2016. And you still have 2016 mailbox proxying traffic back to 2013 mailbox for those users that are still on the old environment, we'll call it right now. And now it turns into a rinse and repeat process, right? You stand up another, and then you get rid of one 2013 CAS, and you stand up another 2016 box. Same thing. Add that to the load balancer pool. Traffic flows like you would expect. We get rid of another one. I put 2010 everywhere in here. Apparently I didn't proofread this slide. But we rinse, we repeat, and eventually we've gotten rid of all of the traffic going to 2013 CAS to the point where we have only 2016 mailbox accepting client traffic going back to 2013 mailbox servers. And you can be moving mailboxes during this time. Everything's just going to work. And hopefully we're going to demo this later. This is the demo I said that's going to be both exciting and boring at the same time. Because if it works, it's not flashy, but it's awesome that it works. All right, does that make sense so far? All right, so we'll go another layer deeper because we like colored squares. And in a 2016, 13, 10 coexistence environment, because why not add all three versions? Who expects to have all three versions? Anybody? Okay, somebody just yelled public folders, so I won't come here for questions later. But there were a good number of hands that went up. So in this environment here, we've got our lovely mail.contoso.com taking client traffic, and there's a few things going on. We hit the default website, and then again, we authenticate, we locate, and we figure out what we're going to do. We're going to proxy, we're going to redirect. And in this case, you see 2013 CAS does proxy over to the default website on 2016. All right, so we hit our client access services, because there's no more server, right? Just the services still exist. And then we connect to the protocol head to get into the information store if the user is on 2016. And we will always send the traffic to the 2016 server that has the active copy of that database. So if a user is in a database with multiple copies, we will find the active copy and route the traffic to the node that has the active copy. Behind the scenes, 2013 is still doing the same thing it would have done for 2010, proxying the traffic back to 2010 as appropriate, or redirecting if there was an external URL in that environment in the site 2010 lives in. So now we've gotten to that point where we've moved all of our client access traffic over to 2016, and we are simply bypassing 2013 client access services entirely. If the user is on 2010, we will proxy back to 2010 CAS, because 2010 CAS will then do that RPC connection back into the information store for 2010. But if the user is on 2013, the traffic comes into 2016, hits the 2016 mailbox server, and we go directly to 2013 mailbox, bypassing CAS entirely. So we're no longer dependent on the old CAS to CAS proxy method. We will go direct to mailbox with 2016 to 2013. And this is why you can actually now think about getting rid of the 2013 client access servers if you deployed single role. Okay? Eventually it's gone. Yay! So let's talk a little bit about preparing. Some of these things you'll probably expect, but we've got a couple of other little nuggets in here. So, lots of asterisks here, right? Subject to change as we get closer to release time. We'll have a better understanding of what RUs or cumulative updates will actually be the final requirement before installing 2016. We are making a significant change to the Active Directory domain and functional level requirements. We are bumping those up to Server 2008. Somebody's probably going to ask why, so let's just get it out of the way. We are aligning ourselves with the servicing model for Windows Server. Server 2003 is going out of support, so we are going to align ourselves with the next level. There is no technical functional requirement that we need for this functional level, but we are aligning ourselves with the Windows team and their support model as well. So there will be a block in place by RTM that will look at Active Directory and say, ooh, you're still Server 2003 mode. You have to upgrade to at least Server 2008 mode before 2016 will be allowed to do anything. Can't update the schema, can't install a server. Setup will just cry and whine until you actually go and bump your levels up, and then it will be happy and carry forward. Outlook requirements. These are very similar to the Outlook requirements of 2013. They're essentially using the same protocol stacks and types in Outlook in 2016. Outlook 2016 doesn't need any particular KBs. Now, do me a favor, right? Don't run out and say, I need that KB with Outlook 2013 SP1, I need that KB for 2010 SP2. Just go and get the latest Outlook cumulative update, please. There are so many things that have been fixed after these minimum requirements that you'll just be setting yourself up for eventual failure if you go and grab those. So just go out, grab the latest ones. I think April 2015 is the most recent one that we released for Outlook 2013. I forget what 2010's recent one. You will notice that Outlook 2007 is no longer on the board. All right, that is no longer a supported client for 2016. Or it's on the board, but in the not supported area. MAPI over CDO package, no longer supported. Right? That died with Exchange Server 2013 support. That's how that was aligned. That is no longer supported for 2016. You'll need the newer version of Outlook for Mac, all right, 2011. So just keep these in mind in your environment. Try to do some inventory, figure out what's out there, get in the habit of updating the client. I've got a lot of customers I've worked with where all they do is they apply service packs for Office, but they're not applying the cumulative updates that come out every couple of months or so. You really need to go get those. We find a lot of things from the service that Outlook then wraps into those cumulative updates that also make the on-premises experience a lot better. So, no server core. That's already been asked this week, and downstairs someone asked me. So we still do require the full graphical user interface install of server at this point in time. Our plans today are to support 2012 R2, and when it does release, Server 10. .NET Framework 4.5.2, that is currently what we're requiring. This may change as well. The .NET team is evaluating their servicing model and how often they release updates, and we are going to have some conversations with them. I don't know if, Brent, did you speak to this in your session yesterday on servicing? So we'll be having some conversations with the .NET team to figure out how we're going to align our support stance with them as they evaluate what they're going to be doing in the future with regards to updates go. So you might see us get perhaps a little more aggressive on saying you need to keep up to date. 4.5.2 itself had some huge improvements for perf that helped us in a lot of interesting ways with 2013. So if you're still running on 4.5.1, I would strongly recommend you go out and update to 4.5.2. Windows Management Framework 4 at this time. Again, we've got quite a ways until release, so we'll decide before we release if 4 is going to be the minimum bar or if suddenly 5 lights up. UCMA 4, no difference there. And also there's going to be, for the modern attachment experience, which we'll show a little bit more later, and I know Kip Fern and James Peters have had a session either already or later in the week on the modern attachment experience. You will require a standalone server by itself to get attachment viewing inside of OWA itself. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Don't forget Edge. When you go to install, if 2016 says, not all of your servers are on Service Pack 3, you're like, I know they all are. I went and did all the updates last weekend. What are you telling me about? If you have Edge Transport in your environment, you've got it synced to one of your Active Directory sites with an Edge subscription, you do have to go and redo that Edge subscription in order for the version number to be incremented in Active Directory. If you don't do that, it's still going to look like it's Service Pack 2 or I don't even want to say it, but Service Pack 1 for 2010 if you don't go and redo the subscription. So just go redo the subscription quickly. The configuration partition in AD will get incremented with a new version number, and then you'll be able to go and install 2016. Don't sink your battleship. What I mean by this is if you have, let's just say, only 2010 in your environment today, and you go and you grab 2016 when it comes out, and you say, I want to install this and start playing with this. And this has been the same for few releases, but it still catches people off guard. If for any reason you think you might need to install 2013 because there's a feature that's been deprecated or there's a client that 2013 supports that 2016 doesn't support, and for some unknown reason you can't get off that client, maybe because you hired a contractor 10 years ago to write an app and they left and didn't give you the source code, now some critical business app is running off of that client, and there's probably a few people stuck in that position. We talk to them all the time. If you even think you're going to need 2013 in your environment for something like that, install a 2013 server with all the roles on it before you introduce 2016. As soon as you get past this highlighted step, this prepare AD step, which the graphical user interface was set up will also do if you've got the rights to do it. It won't tell you. It'll just say establishing prereqs or something along that line. It will go and run prepare AD behind the scenes. When you do that, you now cannot reintroduce a lower version of Exchange. You're done. Your only option now is to go from 2010 to 2016. So if you think you need 2013 in the environment, just install one of the servers, put on a small little VM if you want to just have it there off to the side, not taking up a bunch of resources, then start going through your 2016 install process. Otherwise, you will not be able to reintroduce the first 2013 server at a later time. A repeat from 2013 when it was new. Anybody that's in an environment with only 2010 today, this is something for you to pay attention to. If you have a large offline address book, I haven't checked recently, but the last time I looked, the Microsoft one was something along the lines of 700 megabytes on disk. When you install the first 13 server, that happened then as well, so just be aware in case you're in the middle of a project to install 2013, or you install the first 16 server, we're going to drop a new default offline address book into your environment, and it is going to get marked as default. So what that means is the next time your clients go through their update cycle for OABs, they're going to start downloading this new offline address book. If you're a company with an OAB that's as large as ours or bigger, we've seen much bigger if there's lots of certificates and such stored in it, you suddenly have a whole swarm of clients downloading OABs from your single server now that's generating the new OAB because you installed the server on Sunday. So to get around this, very, very simple. Go to your 2010 databases. If the default offline address book is currently null because you've just got the one that you've been using for all time in there, go ahead and take your current offline address book, put it in the default offline address book value for your databases, and then when you install the new server, even though there's a new offline address book and it's marked as default for the environment, your users will still be using the value inherited from their database their mailbox resides in. So real quick, easy way to get around that. I just want to make sure you're aware of it. And then definitely if you're going from 2010 to 13 in the crowd, this also applies to you. All right, so we got a bit of an eye chart coming up here. And the next slide is not something I'm going to speak to. I just put it in there for your reference. So we've got this old slide that you probably saw back in 2013 days. This is not going to be a test for the people in the back. I can see the Opera binoculars coming out. But it just tells you, depending on what version of Exchange a client is hitting and what protocol, what the action would be. We've updated this for 16. And if you do go back and take a look at this, once the deck is made available, what you're going to see is that essentially we can always proxy the traffic if there's not a required redirect, say, for an external AD site that's somewhere else. So just wanted you to have that so you could have a quick cheat sheet to say, okay, ActiveSync comes in, what's going to happen? OWA comes in, what's going to happen? So you have that to your disposal as you speak with the rest of your folks at your companies or for customers if you're in a consulting role. So let's talk about namespace planning. Who's using split DNS in their environment today? Awesome. Who's using non-split DNS? And the rest aren't paying attention or don't care to raise their hand. Okay. So most of you are split DNS. So we feel split DNS is the right way to go. And when we talk about namespaces, we've got two models, an unbound namespace model and a bound namespace model. And the easiest way to think of it is in the unbound model, we don't care what server you hit. You just type in a URL, you get to a server. We don't care what data center that server lives in. In the bound namespace model, that means that for reasons your company has determined, whether it is they want, maybe there's a bandwidth problem between data centers, which is interesting because if they're trying to cross their DAG between the two, then why are they even attempting that? But whatever. There's reasons when sometimes it makes sense to a company to have the bound model where if my mailbox is in the US, I always hit mail.us.fabricom.com. If my mailbox is in Europe, I always hit mail.emea.fabricam.com. And if I happen to put the wrong one in, we would redirect you to the appropriate data center. That's the bound namespace model. We send you where you're supposed to connect instead of just saying, come on in, everything's fine, and then behind the scenes proxying the traffic between the data centers. So in the 16 world, right, all 2016, your migration's done. This is essentially what you're looking at. And of course, this is, again, the first time we're showing this. Reserve the right to alter things as the product gets more mature before release. But you're looking at, in the unbound model, your auto-discover record, which should already exist today, an external client access URL per site resilient data center pair. Right, so if you've got 4 data centers, and 2 have DAGs between them, and the other 2 have DAGs between them, each one of those guys are going to need a pair, client access URL, an internal and an external one, and a couple of URLs for this Office web app server that we're going to talk a little bit about, but not much because there's a whole session on modern attachments later. In the bound namespace model, you're also going to see we need auto-discover, an internal URL, an external URL, and 2 Office web app server URL. That's really hard where it's still OWA. I hope they pick a different name because I'm going to be totally confused for about the next 10 years. So you'll notice, though, that it also says per data center in the bound namespace model because we're going to direct the traffic to the particular data centers they need to be in. So let's talk about 2007 and 2016. This is pretty much the easiest one, right? Nothing to do here. Nope. That doesn't fall into our support model. So we'll just keep on trucking through. 2010 and 2016, you're probably going to start off looking like this. We've got a whole bunch of these scenarios. I might skip a couple of them for time, but we put them in here for your reference later. You've got, all, I think, every possible combination. So you may have a couple of 2010 multi-role servers. That hashed line in the middle is not a street line. That delineates 2 different Active Directory sites. You can see that we're doing the bound model. So down below, we see mail.fabricam.com, auto-discover, a mail US, fabricam.com, and also we call the Outlook, oh boy, here we go, client access array RPC URL. So that's the URL where the clients using RPC over TCP connect directly to the database if they're not using Outlook Anywhere. On the other side of the pond, we've got mail.emea and Outlook RPC.emea. Now, you can do this a bunch of different ways. I like to use the different zones in DNS, so that's why I have like the .us and the .emea. You could easily just have mail dash if you want to keep them in one zone in DNS, and then you can use a wildcard certificate. You know, they're all in the same DNS zone. We also now see our friend the Office web app server over on each location that we've introduced. I've got an internal and an external URL. We'll speak to why it needs 2. And the little purple asterisk essentially means that in split DNS, those records only exist internally. You do not want those records available externally. If I'm at home on public internet, I should not be able to resolve those names. Otherwise, bad things may happen with the client. We'll try to do things that shouldn't to make sure they're not available. We introduce a couple of 2016 servers to the environment. We go through our process. We eventually move our namespaces over, and this is what you're going to see. You've got a whole bunch of URLs on the left-hand side, auto-discover, mail, mail US, mail failback, right? That's for 2010. That's to prevent the continuous loop if you hit the wrong server for 2010. And also just the generic mail.fabricam if you're going to use that also as your entry point for maybe SMTP. You've still got your RPC URL down below that resolves to 2010. And on the opposite side of the screen, we've got our data center specific URLs for the European data center. Right, so what does this mean? This means that we have a whole bunch of names to consider. Some that are internal only, some that are internal and external. So in this case, we've got 14 names to plan for, and this is only a 2 data center model. So if you're doing the bound namespace with 8, 10, 12 data centers, and they're in pairs of 2, which is what we recommend. We don't recommend spanning a DAG across more than 2 data centers. These are what you need to consider. In this case, you've got 12 names in the certificate. Now, this might be a case where it makes sense to go after the wildcard certificate, and that's fine. You can use a wildcard. That's cool. We can do that. We support it. And instead of using the DNS zones like I do here, you just keep everything fabricam.com, and it's mail, mail-US, mail-EMEA, mail-APAC, whatever you want it to be. So moving on to the Unbound model, it gets a bit easier. All right, so we introduce, I'll just go right to the end here. Oh, I forgot my URLs in the Office web app server. So you're going to have two different URLs, internal and external. Now what's interesting here is, let me just get to the end of the animation to explain it. There they are. Is even though we're in the Unbound model, that Office web app server still uses bound for its URLs. And the reason behind that is when you are going to open up one of these attachments in that new side-by-side experience, the traffic between the Exchange mailbox server, where the database is mounted, and the Office web app server there is what is most critical. It's not the Office web app server to the client that's most critical, it's between the two servers. So we need to make sure that you're hitting one of those servers in the same data center as your database. So even in the Unbound model for client access as far as Exchange is concerned, we are going to route your traffic to the closest Office web app server, or closest server to your mailbox database where it's live. You can see here it's much more simple. We've just got mail.fabricam, MailCorp, we got our AutoDiscover, and we still have our RPC URLs for Outlook 2010 as well. So we've now cut our names down to 9 names, 7 of which are on the certificate. Now, why do we have, if I go back, an internal and an external? Well, if you only have one set of URLs, say it's just mail.fabricam.com, and let's say you want to do Kerberos authentication on your internal users, because they can hit AD and they can get a Kerberos ticket, but you want to do basic or NTLM auth for your external users, you can't do that with one URL. You have to have 2 different ones because you have to be able to tell Outlook, hey, when you're hitting this URL, use Kerberos, or use negotiate auth is what it would actually say. When you're hitting this other URL, because you're sitting at home on the public internet, use NTLM or basic. So without the capability of having 2 URLs to then tell Outlook what auth type for each one, you won't be able to pick and choose. You're only going to be able to have one authentication type in use, and you really won't be able to do Kerberos because, well, if your client's trying to do Kerberos from the external world, that's not going to work very well, unless they're VPN'd in, but then they're essentially on the internet at that point. All right. So 13 and 16, this is a relatively easy model here. So we introduced our 2016 servers and our Office web app servers, and eventually all we do is move where the namespace goes to. There's not a whole much with 16 and 13 coexistence. It just works. It's nice and easy. All right, so we've got our similar looking URLs as before, and in this instance here, we have 10 names and 10 names on the certificate because we no longer have those RPC URLs that are for Outlook Exchange 2010 in use. The Unbound model, get to the end here. All right. As you would expect, it's getting easier. We're reducing names. We're not directing clients to the different data centers. So in this experience, we have now cut our names down to 7, also 7 names on the certificate. Right? Again, using internal and external URLs so that you can specify different authentication types for your clients. All right, this is where it starts to get freaky. We've got all 3 versions in place here. All right, so we've got 13 and 10 sitting there, happy. They've now got a nice set of arrows coming out of the cloud and hitting them. All right, we're in the bound model. We're directing clients to the 2 different data centers. We've got an RPC URL for the internal viewers that are using direct RPC from Outlook. We introduced our 2016 and our Office web app servers. All right, so there's an immediate 4 new URLs once we introduced that server to the party. But in this case, all we're doing is flipping the namespace resolution. Right? We're going to take the traffic from 13 and we're going to pass it off to 16. So in that case, if you're coming from 2010 and 13 and you're going to add 16, the only thing that you're adding to the environment are in this case, the 4 URLs for the Office web app server. All your other URLs can stay the same. Now that's also assuming that you're using different internal and external URLs today. If you're not, you might have a couple more to add to the environment so that you can do the different authentication types depending on where the client is located. All right, so more versions, more names. We're up to 12 names now. 10 of those names would be on the certificate. We do not include the Outlook RPC names on the certificate because we're not using SSL for RPC, right? For the clients that are on the intranet connecting to Exchange 2010, they're just going straight RPC. They don't care about certificates, right? They only care about certs for EWS or offline address book downloads, things like that. They don't care about the actual RPC connection. All right. The unbound model, as you would expect, is a bit easier, right? We don't have to direct you to the particular data centers. This probably feels a little repetitive, but it is, because it's the same exact experience depending on what you're doing, whether you're choosing bound or unbound. At the end of the day, let's just skip forward here. Skip by here. What we want you to look at is that when you start to compare all the models, right, there's definitely a benefit in our eyes to going to the unbound model because there's a lot less management going on of certificate names. Way easier. Right? You might just be able to use a single wildcard certificate for the entire environment that you then have to worry about renewing every few years instead of one with a bajillion different names on it. So every environment is going to be a little different. Right? When you start to go back and look at your own environments, you might say, well, the slides look like this and we kind of look like that. That's okay. There's going to be difference in all the environments. I didn't, like, for example, I did not include non-internet facing sites in any of these slides. That might be another whole set of names you have to add on. So some of those examples, if you've got another non-internet facing site, you might have to add another 50% of names if you're doing, making sure you get traffic to those non-internet facing sites. So just some examples, things to look at, what do I have to worry about when I'm doing my namespace planning? And as we get closer to release, I'm sure we'll start doing a bunch of blog posts on here are some of the example environments out there. Here's how we would go through picking what names we're going to use. Here's how we would do the certificate request, et cetera, things we've done in the past, so that all of you are armed with the information you need to have a successful deployment once we release. Because you're all releasing on day one, right? I know I am. No? Okay. So one guy, nice. I saw that. So when we get to installing, what is the easiest way? So when we had a conference call with our TAP customers and partners, this was kind of what I said was my approach. The 7-step process to getting 16 installed, right, when you look at it from a high level. The first one is one that people always ask me about and say, what the heck is this site deployment thingy you tell me I need to put a server into and move it back? And well, what I like to do personally, and this is my personal preference, your server deployment processes may be different, I like to have an Active Directory site that's logically carved inside Active Directory that has a global catalog server in it, and I can move servers in and out of that site at leisure so that when I do my installation, it sits in that site, it's away from everything else, it's not in the site with any other Exchange servers. Because what happens is if I go and install my first 16 server in the same production AD site as all my 13 servers or 10 servers, whatever it is, what happens? That server's configuration immediately becomes available for auto-discover answers. So if you've got 10 servers, and you introduce an 11th server that's 16, you install it, all the virtual directories or the FQDN value, well, essentially now every 11th auto-discover response is going to have the wrong information on it, and you're going to get client pop-ups and all sorts of fun things. So you could do yourself, a favor, save yourself some angina, and move that server into a little AD site, deploy it, configure it. When you're ready, move it in the production site. Very easy. You can go into AD, do like a /31 or even a /32 subnet, which is down to /32. It's the actual IP of the box represents a subnet. And if you've got friends in the AD team, just say, yep, move that in and out. We'll bounce the box and get it into the correct site when I'm done. So this is all based on Server 2012 R2 right here. I've not played with Server 10 yet. Almost said 2010. That would have been right. The reason I'm saying install the desktop experience and the RSAT ADDS role first is because those two typically require a reboot. So just launch the server, put all your Windows updates on it, put .NET 4.5.2 and any .NET updates that came out after that on it, drop into PowerShell, import module, server manager I think it is, add Windows feature, desktop experience, RSAT ADDS, those install, reboot the box. UCMA4, install that, reboot the box. You have to do desktop experience first because there are components in that UCMA4 needs. So, and I also learned recently from the gentleman that runs our dog food environment that if you install UCMA4 from the command line and use like the MSI installer commands, it doesn't actually reboot the box. So if you want to avoid a reboot, you could do that from the command line. Install 2016. Click the little box that says Allow Windows Server Components. That will install all of the other stuff that you would expect, all those IIS components. It's easier to do it that way than to go into PowerShell and run a script with 30 different components in my eyes. You certainly could do that if you want to pre-stage them, or if you want to have a box ready with all the roles to go and then you sysprep that image or something. But this is what I like to do. Reboot the box after you're done, because there are registry keys that are put in during setup that only take effect at system restart. It'll look like it's working, but it might not be performing the way you'd expect unless you do a reboot. Configure everything, slide it back in your Active Directory production site, and then when you're ready, right, you might move some mailboxes on it, play with it a bit, and then when you decide it's time, or maybe you're just adding another server to an existing large environment, you add the server into the load balancing pool. If this is one of your first servers, it might be mixing with other 13 servers as well. You've got a mixed version pool at the load balancer, which is perfectly fine. So, what's better in 2016? We removed the checkbox. It's the primary reason right there. We got rid of the client access server role. You can no longer tick that box in setup. Edge transport remains, management tools remain, but as you know, the management tools now are more like a shortcut to get to remote PowerShell. Right? There's no more console that you installed locally. That last existed in Exchange 2010. And when you go do a setup unattended install, we've also updated the mailbox role in unattended setup to install all the components necessary in the past that you would have had to do, client access and mailbox for 2013. All of those features are installed with the mailbox role in the unattended setup now. Map your HTTP. So everybody running 13, put your hands up again if you don't mind. Just get some exercise. All right, keep your hands, no. Okay. Keep your hands up if you have enabled Map your HTTP. Is there anybody? Okay, we got a few over here. All right. We got probably a dozen people out of maybe 100 or so that put their hands up that have enabled Map your HTTP. We consider this the protocol of the future for Outlook. We want you to enable it. Come down to the expo floor, tell me why you haven't enabled it, love to hear it. We have a debate going on internally right now on whether or not we're going to force enable that when you install your first 2016 server. So I'd be interested in hearing some feedback on what you think about that. We've got differing opinions inside that we're kind of debating on, but this is something that could happen. So when you go and download the bits, make sure you read any blog posts we had out there, read any release notes that we put out. Don't just download it and start installing, because if you've not configured your virtual directories for Map your HTTP or your authentication type, or if you've not opened those paths on your publishing method, and we go turn that on, you could start having some interesting client experiences. So keep an eye out for what we do here, whether we do enable it or not, and I'd love to hear more on why you have not enabled it if you are on 13 today with clients that support Map your HTTP. Some other things worth mentioning. These are items that we see that cause lots of issues that come into escalations in our team. As much as we love to talk to our customers, if you're talking to one of us, it's probably because something's not going right. So we want to help you avoid those. Use the high-performance power plan in Windows. Right? So if you saw the recent blog article by Mark Nivens that talked about CPU troubleshooting with Exchange 2013, this is something that's biting a lot of customers as they go and install Windows and they've not looked at what power plan they're currently using. It might be in a balanced plan, and you're essentially robbing yourself of CPU performance on the box when all of your design work was factoring 100% CPU performance of the box. And now you've got either the BIOS or Windows culling down the performance of the processors that you actually purchased. Hyperthreading, I don't know how many more times we can say it. Disable it in physical deployments. Don't use it. Right? You might get a little bit of perf gain with it, but you're going to have perf reductions from some of the ways that, say, .NET allocates resources on the box due to the number of logical processors. Just turn it off. Do all of your design work based on the physical number of cores in the server. If you're thinking about a virtual deployment, do all your design work based on the physical number of cores in your hypervisor box. Storage controller cache. Right? So if you're using RAID or if you're using JBOD through a RAID controller, which is fine because you still have to configure it as a bunch of RAID 0 drives. Battery back write cache or flash back write cache, definitely a necessity. Also make sure it's working. Some of the hardware vendors might put it in there, but it's not used unless you buy a license, so make sure it's actually functional. Currently, the recommendation is to allocate 75% of that cache to write, 25% to read. Just check TechNet by the time we release to make sure that hasn't changed. If you're using RAID, make sure you're using a stripe or a per disk chunk, as some vendors call it, that is at least 256 kilobytes or larger in multiples of 256. Right? These might sound like things like, yeah, you've been telling this for years. Right, but some people aren't listening, so we want to have a nice big forum here and remind you of some of these little pieces of wisdom. GPT partitions, that is currently what we're suggesting, right? So go ahead and use GPT partitions on your data drives. If you're using an NTFS partition, make sure it's formatted with a 64 kilobyte file allocation unit size, right? Data volumes, we're actually starting to say, go look at ReFS. All right, turn off the data integrity features. We don't need those. We do our data integrity within the product itself. It'd be some head pounding if you had those turned on and us doing our work. But go ahead, use ReFS volumes for all of your data drives. Can't do it for the OS drive, I believe, but you can use it for all of our data partitions. BitLocker, definitely love it. Great for protecting against theft of spindle, right? So if you're going to do JBOD and you've got one disk has the entire copy of the database, you want to protect yourself from somebody coming in and just stealing that drive and walking home with it. So go ahead and use BitLocker. And also JetStress with BitLocker turned on. And your file, if you're going to use AV in the box, with AV turned on, with the exclusions in place for not just the files, but also the directories and the processes that we say. I can't stress that enough. All three of those have to be in place. If you're doing the files and the paths, but you're not doing the processes, bad things can certainly happen. Rob probably knows some of your names from the escalations that come in, right? So definitely something you want to do is you're testing the box as the box will be deployed in production. Anybody want to own up to doing number one here? Disabling the entire IPv6 stack. We don't know what will happen if you do that. That is the God's honest truth. We don't test with the entire IPv6 stack disabled. Leave it on. And you say, well, my network engineers don't use IPv6. There are things you can do besides going in and doing disabled components, 0x, FF. You can have different values in there that will do things like not register the DNS record for IPv6 of the box. So consider any and all alternatives before you go and disable the entire IPv6 stack. I'll admit I do not yet know if we're going to support a pure IPv6 environment or not yet for 2016. I think there's still some discussion over whether or not you're going to still need 4 and 6 enabled, or if we're going to allow pure v6. So, message to come later. Don't go and randomly disable services. Well, my security says I've got to disable this. Okay, we don't know what's going to happen. The service is on the box for a reason. We put it there. It's not like we give you a tick box and say, what services would you like to install, sir or ma'am? We're going to install all of them. They're all there. The boxes are tested with all the services there. You might disable things that you think are innocent, and then you find that there's a dependency between a couple of services. Or you disable a service and you mark it so that it can't be turned on, and the box is trying to fix itself, and you start seeing a server bounce and bounce and bounce and bounce because you went and disabled a service. And then we've got the health check and exchange trying to fix itself. Right? Don't go and say, how many TCP ports do I need? No, really, how many do I need? Is it 10? Is it 12? Just leave it alone. We don't support any restriction there. You are going to need a lot of ports. There's no answer to how many you need. Right? We're talking about the ephemeral port range here. Windows just dynamically distributes them as connections come in and out. Don't go and shrink that down. You will have problems. Keep it up to date. Just in the ride in, was having a discussion with a coworker about a cluster problem in a case he was working on where the customer had 5-year-old NIC drivers. And they refused to update the NIC drivers because they were having cluster problems, but they didn't have problems a week ago, and the drivers were there. What they had done was they installed a security update for Windows that had a new version of TCP/IP.sys in it. Well, do you think there could be correlation there? Maybe. So keep things up to date. That customer then called their hardware vendor for help, and the hardware vendor said the same thing. We don't support those drivers anymore. So you get stuck in this nasty loop of vendors telling you to go update things. So you can save yourself a lot of trouble by keeping things up to date. I forget the exact number, so I won't say it because I don't want to make up a number on the spot, but there was a recent survey inside of support to say, okay, out of all the cases we've fixed in the last 90 days, how many were fixed simply by applying a newer cumulative update? And it was some staggering percentage. I don't remember exactly what it was. So just keeping up to date helps fix things that we already knew about, we already fixed, and help yourself save a bunch of time and a lot of aggravation by keeping up to date. That doesn't mean go and install it day one. We understand. You've got to work with third-party vendors sometimes to let them validate the software and get the update out there, put it in your labs, make sure that everything's working. But don't, we're on CU 8 now, right? 8 or 9? 8? Some big number, right? 8. Thank you, Brent. So I've got them right there. Don't go and run, Service Pack 1 or CU 5. Please, come join the party. Be a bigger number. Clients, just as important. We talked about earlier, keep your clients up to date. We did a very interesting thing in Office 365 a year or so ago, which was we went and found the biggest offenders on clients in Office 365. I mean, we found Office 2007, RTM, no service packs, big company names you guys would understand, you'd recognize. Keep your clients up to date. You will save yourself lots and lots of headaches. I'm not just towing a party line here. This is legitimate. Once you've installed 2016 and you're ready to go into production, you will want to find this system mailbox, the one that starts in that GUID there, the E0DC1, and move it to a 2016 database. This was also for 2013 in a 2010 or 7 environment. You needed this system mailbox to be moved to 2013 for some of the things below to work. You will also have to move this mailbox to 16 to get some new 2016 functionality to work as well. So if you're coming from 2010 or 13, make sure the system mailbox gets moved. Kerberos, we're not going to touch on too much here because the story is not changing. But what we want you to know is that if you're going to do 2010 and 16 coexistence, you can follow the same exact steps for 2010 and 2013. We actually went and made sure that the ASA alternate service account credential could be shared between 13 and 16 so that the steps would be exactly the same as they are today for 10 and 13. So in an environment that has 13 and 16, you can use the same ASA across both versions. That will work. The scripts that come out of the box will work. You must be using the scripts that we send you, the role alternate service account credential PS1 script. If you're in an environment with all 3 versions, you're going to need 2 ASAs. One that goes for 2010 SPNs, right? I'm not even remember them all now. The referral one, the offline address book one, and the RPC one. And you'll also have an ASA that is for HTTP for 2013 and 2016. So very easy. Follow the AKA link there. That'll get you the coexistence information for 10 and 13. And anywhere it references 2013, you could repeat those steps for 2016 as well. We touched on OA here. So before the Office web app server is in the environment and configured, you'll notice that you no longer have the capability to click an attachment and view it within OA. That was some third-party code that we have now removed from Exchange that we licensed in the past, and we're now replacing it with something else that we've created. So if you're using, say, like OA on a kiosk user, right, they might not be able to view the attachment at all unless that kiosk has the native app installed on it. So keep that in mind. You'll see down at the bottom what it looks like if you have either a native application for that file extension or none, right? You either get the save cancel or the open save cancel if you do download it. And that is because when you install 16, you're going to notice that this environment is in a null value, this WAC discovery endpoint. And this is the URL you will configure that tells Exchange where to go and find information about that Office web app server. And the discovery URL for Office web apps is their version of AutoDiscover. So if you were to type in the URL manually on a client and go to that server and see what it spits back at you, it's basically going to tell you what their Office web app server configuration looks like. So if you're trying to view a document, well, I support these commands, and you have to come to these URLs to get that. If you're trying to open a PowerPoint or Excel, etc., it tells you where to go and how to do it. That sounds kind of funny, doesn't it? So go ahead, type that in. You'll be able to also validate your web app server configuration by going to the Discover URL. You might not be able to see it, but at the top here, it's essentially the name of the server / discovery / hosting. Hosting / discovery. Very easy to put that in. It's going to be a load balance name with a certificate value on it. You see I got the cert warning there because I was just using localhost. But when you configure it in the environment, it's going to look like this. Set organization config, right? And then you give it the endpoint. Now, this is not our final plan. This is not what we hope it to look like by RTM. I'm showing you this right now because if I don't know what our public preview plans may or may not be. It's summerish, sometime this calendar year. If we give you a public preview of 2016, it might still look like this by then, so we want you to be able to install it, configure it, and be able to use it, and not be waiting on us to update documentation. So you'd set this URL. You can check here that it's been set. You restart the app pool inside of the Exchange servers themselves. Now you're going to notice you've got two options. You now have a view and a download. So now, regardless of you not having Office installed locally, right, you could still view the document. You can click the view. You now get the side-by-side view that has attachment rendering right within the OA pane. What you can't see is that's actually being rendered in an iframe inside the same browser. So where you see our little unicorn friend there, that's actually an iframe inside of OA that goes to the Office Web App Server URL. So the client, if you were to open the dev tools in IE and watch the network trace as this is happening, you'll see just like Office 365, we're passing an OAuth, an open authentication off to the web app server after Exchange and web apps have exchanged authentication information and given you that token. Your client will then authenticate to the web app server, telling it, hey, I'm so-so, I'm auth, here's my token, I'm looking to get this document. And the web app server will say, yes, sir, I've been expecting you. Here you go, here's your view. All right. So Outlook Anywhere. For those of you that are coming from 2010 alone, this will be important for you. If you're coming from 2010 and 2013, you may have already gone through this process, but it's worth repeating for those in 2010. So in the environment, you've probably got some non-internet facing sites and internet facing sites. You've got Outlook Anywhere enabled on 2010 CAS. At the moment, you may have basic authentication for both client and IIS. Well, one of the first things going to happen here is we need to enable Outlook Anywhere on all of the legacy CAS. The reason for this is without Outlook Anywhere actually enabled, the RPC proxy DLL file is not running in IIS. You can't pass traffic through it. And we need that running to be able to proxy traffic from 13 or 16 back to 2010. So you'll enable Outlook Anywhere in all of your legacy CAS. For IIS, you're going to enable NTLM authentication for all of your 2010 CAS. They can be both basic and NTLM. That's perfectly fine. If you're using basic today, just add NTLM. Perfectly fine. You can stop right there as far as IIS changes for the IIS auth. Client settings. You now have to go back. Since you've enabled Outlook Anywhere in all of your legacy CAS, you have to configure the URLs on them for Outlook Anywhere. Essentially, all of your 2010 CAS are going to have the same look and feel for their Outlook Anywhere configuration. The host name you put in is going to be the host name that will eventually be traffic passed to 2016. So they'll hit the load balancer, they'll hit their Outlook Anywhere host name, which will be your load balancer now with, in this case, mail.contosa.com, hitting Exchange 2016, which then behind the scenes proxies the traffic off to the 2010 CAS, and then 2010 CAS does their RPC connection in the store. So pretty easy, it's 4 steps. Turn on Outlook Anywhere everywhere. Make sure IIS has NTLM off added to it if it doesn't have it already. Configure Outlook Anywhere in all the CAS so that they've got the same settings, in this case pointing to mail.contosa.com, and then switch your namespace over so that you're pushing the traffic to 2016 instead of 2010. Just a real quick note on object management. So object management in 2013, you can actually manage 2016 objects in both EAC and EMS. So we've given you this as well. So that when you introduce 2016 in the environment, you open up your management shell icon. It could connect to 2013, it could connect to 2016. It's the luck of the draw. Whichever remote PowerShell endpoint it picks, it's okay. Because you can actually manage both versions from the same PowerShell endpoint. Right? So you don't have to worry about forcing the traffic to a particular remote PowerShell endpoint or not. We made sure that that worked so that you had seamless capability across both of them. Outlook 2010, it's definitely a your mileage may vary scenario. Some objects you can manage certain attributes on, but not other attributes. You won't be able to, say, create a new mailbox in 2010 from the 13 or 16 tools. So you're probably better off at that point just using the 2010 management tools so that you know it's going to work. It's not going to be, oh, shoot, I can't do that attribute. I've got to go to these tools instead. All right, so with that, I thought we'd get to our exciting and boring demo. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know what state my lab is in, so we're going to all be excited together and see what happens here. Just give me a second to get into my machine. And again, after this, I'll be downstairs for about an hour. So come down there, we'll have a whiteboard. We can talk about anything you guys would like. Also see our TAP representative up front here, if you'd like to join TAP. Oh, I got the wrong screen on. Oh, this might go badly. Hold on, I just got to slide my laptop over. Okay, so, wrong mouse. I'm going to open first, let's go to a 2016 server first. All right. I'm going to log on. I'm going to close this window so you don't think I'm cheating. I'm going to close this window. There it goes. You know what? Why don't we just, to get rid of any naysayers in the audience, we will, whoops, fig//nes nbt stat. All right, let's just keep it honest here. I'm also going to open up a PowerShell session. Hey, get out of the way. All right, so all I'm going to show here first is just literally what the splash screen looks like. And there's a reason I'm showing you this. I went to localhost, so the cert error is expected. All right, it's just the blue OWA logon screen, what you would expect, right? So I'm going to now jump over to a 2013 CU8 server. I'm going to unlock this box. I'm going to do the same thing here, just to keep everybody honest. Okay, we're now going to open localhost here, just so you can see what I've done is I have changed just the splash screen color so that you can differentiate from where I'm about to go between the two servers. So my 2013 CU8 server has the Ignite orange splash color, and the 2016 server has the blue, right, the Exchange blue. I'm going to grab PowerShell here and just show you guys what's in the environment. Very simple environment. Name, admin display version. I forget what we call it, so we'll do that. Typo. Of course, it's the most important one that I type wrong. So now we'll just wait for PowerShell to error out. Admin display version. And it's just the server role I believe I want. It looks like we've got two of those. All right, now, there's a 2010 server in the environment that's running SP3. There's a 2013 CU8 server, build 1076.9. There's a 2016 server. As you can see, we've kind of done what the Windows team did for years there, where we just increment the minor version to keep things within the product a lot easier as far as coexistence goes. And if I scroll over to the right, you can see my 13 and 16 servers are both multi-role servers, right? So I'm doing pretty much everything what we tell you to do as far as preferred architecture goes there. I'm now going to open up a Windows 8 client. And you know what? I just thought of something else I need to prove first. Let's go here. Get mailbox 2016 user. So there's no client access server role in 16, but you do still see like the services represented. There's probably still going to be some, I didn't see who said it, I'm sorry, I'm just staring blankly over here, right here. So you're probably still going to see some remnants of the old CAS role in the code and PowerShell commands. as we decide whether or not we're going to rip those out, rename them, or what we do there. So there will be a little bit of oddness there that you see over time. Oh. I think it's mailbox database, but all right, so we can see it's on 2016 DB-01. I mean, all this just to prove where it lives. I think I needed copies, actually. Right. All right, okay, so we can see that that database only has a single copy, and it's living on 2016. That's really the point. I'm logging into a 2016 database. That's the point I want to get across. So now I'm going to come back to my Windows 8 machine. I'm going to log in here as 2016 user. And I'm going to first show you my host file, because I've done a couple of things here. I'm essentially just making it easy for me to control where my traffic's going to go. Right? I'm just doing my name resolution here within the host file. So we'll start with 16. All right. Save. So we should see the .66 IP come up. Oop. Okay, we see our .66. I'm now going to open up OA. Okay, I got my blue splash screen. So that means I'm hitting 2016, as expected. I saved my password, so I couldn't screw up typing that. All right, we log into OWA. We're almost there. We didn't get the frowny face, thankfully. The demo gods are with us, and we're in the mailbox. Right, so the mailbox is mounted. It's live. We can get to it going through 2016. So, right, as we were speaking about earlier, so now all I'm going to do here is comment out the 2016 IPs. I'm going to force name resolution over 2013. Let's see what we get. All right, so we've already taken effect. We're at 62 now. I'm going to open up my URL once more. All right, we're at the orange one, right? So now we're going to 2013 server. So we're hitting the default website on the 2013 server. And we're going to log on again as 2016 user. And if the gods are with us, we're almost there. We're in the 16 mailbox. See? So we have heard what you said. We know deployment was always a pain in the neck, having to deploy all the new version first. We've now given you the capability to introduce the new version in your environment in a way that is much easier, less of an impact on you guys, and you can start playing with the new server builds without messing with your namespace, your load balancer, or anything like that, to hopefully get you guys a little more comfortable and able to ramp up more quickly. So with that, we literally have 2 minutes left. We could take a couple questions if we want. Please use a microphone, just because it's being recorded, or I can try to repeat it if you're not near one, and I'll be downstairs for an hour in the expo hall. So thank you guys very much. Question right up here.
On the 16 mailbox database,
yes.
Is there a public folder setting?
On the 2016 mailbox database, is there a public folder setting? Which one are we talking about?
So like on 13, we can point it to a 10 public folder.
Yes. Okay, so on 2013, we had the default public folder database for 2013 mailbox database object. The reason that existed was so that in coexistence with 2010 public folders or 2007 public folders, you could direct to the default. That should still be there in 16 for those environments that still have 2010 public folders today. Oh. Thanks. Next, yes, sir. Oh, they killed the mic on us? All right, I'll just repeat it. What do you got? Yep. Talk to your tap guy right behind you. He'll be able to walk you through, because that's all. It's doable, but it's a longer conversation. Or just come downstairs and find me.
Brian, question.
Right. Whoa, where'd that come from? Yep. Wave your hand right in front of me. I'm blind.
You. Okay. Related to detailed protocol on HTTP, we need to pay attention to IPS devices. I mean, change on detailed HTTP communications between 2013 and 2016.
So as far as intrusion protection stuff?
Yeah.
Reading the HTTP stream?
Yes, maybe to avoid the prevention systems to break traffic in 2016 servers.
The only, hold on, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just going back to this because I feel like he's going to yell at me if I don't show the next slide here. So, I mean, IPS stuff, if you want to break open the traffic stream and see what's going on inside there, the only option for that, and maybe I'm not understanding correctly, if I'm not, tell me, is do an SSL offload between like the load balancer and the servers, which is, we support that. We don't recommend it, but it's certainly supported.
Okay.
But if IPS is working today in your environment with MAPI or HTTP, I would not expect 16 to break anything. But definitely would say talk to your IPS vendor to get some validation from them as well. And if that doesn't answer it, come find me downstairs.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Next.
Refus, like what is it required, recommended, like what is the status on that, on the data drives?
The data drives themselves?
Yeah.
Can you repeat the first part? Was it the type?
No, Refus. Like instead of NTFS, where it seems that data drives are moving to Refus.
Yeah, we love it. Go for it.
Okay.
Do it.
But can you still run NTFS?
So
is it required or just recommended?
Recommended.
Okay.
Yeah, still support NTFS. If you're going to do an NTFS partition, do the 64K allocation unit size. That's fine, but we recommend going to RFS now going forward.
Okay.
Yep. Yes, sir.
If Exchange 2016 is installed on a 2012 R2 box, will an in-place upgrade to Server 10 be supported?
No comment on that. The question was, can we do an in-place upgrade from 2012 R2 to Server 10? Nothing I can say today. I don't expect that to work going in the future, only because of history. There's a lot of things that can go wrong there, but we've certainly heard that people would like that. So it's something that we constantly evaluate to see whether or not the delta between server versions make that easier or not. And we're still too early to really determine whether or not we can pull that off or if it's still too risky. So you're welcome. Because really at the end of the day is we're trying to protect your data. And if the in-place upgrade for some reason adds a potential destability there as part of that process, we don't want to put the data at risk. That's why. It's not that we want to force you to go through standing up a whole new server and shuffling the databases over. It's just we don't want to mess up the database. Yes?
I just missed where you went by downstairs.
In the expo hall. So if you go down to the expo hall, there's a certain area that's all Rob's office orange color there. And there's an area that's like says Geek Out above it or something. It's a big whiteboard. I'll be the sad guy sitting alone right there.
Okay.
Yes?
Can the unified messaging service up proxy as well?
Unified messaging. Okay, so we skipped entirely in that, not on purpose. But at this point in time, what I've been told is that functionality is going to be identical between 13 and 16. So you can proxy traffic through, say, well, you would hit 2013, you'd hit the call router, and then we'd redirect the SIP call to 2016 mailbox. You can ask, and I'll accept. All right, we're getting kicked out. We didn't pay our rent. So sorry to cut you guys off. We'll go down, come find me downstairs. Otherwise, I'll be around all week. Brian.day@microsoft.com if you got another question, and we'll help you out as much as we can.